She paid $15 for something that would change her life forever. A small gesture that led to a chain of events no one could have predicted. Imagine this, a Hell's Angel biker, tough, intimidating, living life on his own terms. And then a little girl, no older than 8, walks up to him with a crumpled $15 bill. But it's not for candy, it's not for toys. She asks for something no one expected, something that will shock you and make you rethink everything you know about kindness, courage, and the human spirit. What would make a biker like him stop in his tracks, questioning everything he thought he knew? You're about to find out, but before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city name in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because you won't want to miss what happens next. Before we jump into this unbelievable story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. This one is going to leave you questioning everything. This is a story about an unlikely hero, a Hell's Angel biker, feared by many and respected by all, whose life is about to change in the most unexpected way. You see, bikers like him live by a code. It's all about toughness, strength, and loyalty. But sometimes, life throws something at you that makes you pause, question everything, and wonder if your past decisions were the right ones. Enter the little girl. She's just a child, with innocent eyes and a kind heart, but her courage will leave a lasting impact on everyone she meets. She's about to ask the Hell's Angel for a favor, something no one could have predicted. For just $15, she's about to shake his world in ways he could never have imagined. You'll be stunned when you hear what she asks for. Trust me, it's a request that will make you rethink how you see kindness, how you see people, and what it really means to make a difference. So, stay with me, because by the end of the story, you'll have a powerful message that'll stick with you long after the video ends. Before we dive into this emotional roller coaster, let me ask you, where are you watching this from? Comment your city below, and if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. Stories like this come straight from the heart, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. Let's get started. Asterisk, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the small town's outskirts. It was the kind of evening that made you want to sit outside with a cold beer and let the world pass by. But for Alex Crusher Stone, it was another evening spent on the lookout, parked by his usual hangout spot, the old, rusting diner on the corner of Main Street. The air smelled of cheap fast food and gasoline. His motorcycle, a sleek Harley-Davidson with a matte black finish, was parked by the curb, a symbol of his hard-earned freedom. Crusher had been a Hell's Angel for over 20 years. He had seen and done things that most people could never even dream of, things that would make the bravest souls tremble. His reputation had been built on a foundation of toughness, loyalty, and a never-back-down attitude. But it was more than just the bike and the leather jacket. It was the unspoken fear people had when they saw him coming. He lived his life in the fast lane, rarely slowing down, always chasing the next adventure or thrill. Emotions, compassion, they were things he had long buried, locked away behind layers of scars and tattoos. But today, things would change. Crusher leaned back against the worn vinyl seat of the diner booth, sipping his black coffee with a scowl on his face. The evening rush hadn't hit yet, and the place was quiet. He was used to the loneliness. It was a side effect of the life he had chosen. But what he didn't expect was the small figure that walked through the diner door, her tiny steps cutting through the quiet hum of the place. A little girl, no older than 8, entered the diner with a determination in her eyes that was hard to miss. She was alone, standing just inside the door as if trying to make herself invisible to the world. She wore a faded pink dress, one that looked a size too big for her. Her hair, tangled and wild, framed her face in messy curls. But it wasn't her appearance that caught Crusher's attention, it was the air of quiet desperation that seemed to cling to her. Most people in the diner didn't notice her at first, but Crusher did. Something about the way she stood there, her tiny fists clenched by her sides, made his instincts go on high alert. He had dealt with enough rough situations to know when someone was in trouble. There was something off about this situation, something that didn't sit right. The girl took a few hesitant steps forward, eyes scanning the room until they landed on him. Crusher didn't know why, but he felt a chill run down his spine. The little girl was looking straight at him, not at the other patrons, not at the waitress, just him. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hand instinctively resting on the handle of his mug, as if ready to spring into action. Was she lost? In trouble? But what could someone like him do to help a child? He was no hero. His whole life had been built on the idea that weakness was to be avoided at all costs. But there was something about this kid. She wasn't crying, begging, or acting scared. Instead, there was an almost unnatural calm in her eyes, a focus that made him uneasy. With a slow, deliberate stride, she approached his booth, her eyes not leaving his face for a second. The other patrons in the diner had started to notice the strange exchange between the two, their conversations dying down as they watched. The girl stopped right next to Crusher's table. She didn't ask for permission. She just stood there, silent, waiting. "Can I help you, kid?" Crusher's voice was gruff, a natural result of years of shouting over the noise of motorcycles and bar brawls. The little girl hesitated for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice surprisingly steady for someone so small. "Are you a biker?" she asked, her eyes wide but not filled with fear, just curiosity. "Yeah," Crusher replied, a little taken aback. "I'm a biker. What's it to you?" "I need your help," she said simply, not wasting any time with pleasantries. Her words were blunt, as if she was used to asking for help. But the way she said it, so matter-of-factly, gave Crusher pause. "Help with what?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. The girl's gaze dropped for a moment, as if she was thinking, and then she pulled out a crumpled $15 bill from her pocket. She placed it on the table, the paper wrinkled from being handled too many times. "I need you to do something for me. Please." Crusher stared at the money for a moment, his brows furrowing in confusion. This was not what he expected. This little girl, why was she offering him money? Was this some kind of joke? "What do you want me to do with this?" he asked, his voice softening just a touch. She leaned in, and for a brief moment, Crusher's breath caught in his chest. Her eyes were intense, too intense for someone so young. She wasn't afraid of him. There was no hesitation in her, no sign of the usual fear that children displayed when they were around someone like him. Instead, she looked at him as if she knew exactly what she was asking for. "I need you to help my mom," the girl said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "She's in trouble. I don't know who else to ask. You're the only one who can help her." Crusher's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced. Help her mom? What kind of trouble could a kid's mom possibly be in that would require him, of all people, to step in? He leaned forward, suddenly unsure of how to react. This was unfamiliar territory. He was a fighter, a man who dealt with dangerous people, people who threatened him, his club, his life. But helping a child? A mother? This wasn't the kind of situation he was used to. What kind of trouble is she in? Crusher asked, his voice low, laced with suspicion. The girl's gaze didn't waver. She wasn't afraid to answer him. "She's sick, really sick. The kind of sick where no one can help. But you can. You're strong. You can make her better." Crusher didn't know what to say. Was this some kind of scam? Was this girl trying to manipulate him, get him involved in something dangerous? He glanced at the crumpled $15 on the table. It was so small, so insignificant. Yet, something about her words rang true. "You're asking the wrong guy, kid," Crusher muttered, shaking his head. "I'm not some hero. I'm not a doctor. I can't." But the little girl cut him off, her voice surprisingly firm. "Please, she doesn't have anyone else." Crusher stared at her, unsure of what to do. There was a weight in her words that he couldn't ignore. This wasn't some petty request. This was serious. The kind of serious that made his gut tighten. "Okay," he said finally, his voice reluctant but resolute. "I'll help. But you're going to have to tell me exactly what I need to do." Her face lit up, a small spark of hope flickering in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, and just like that, Crusher felt something he hadn't felt in years, a flicker of purpose. But as he looked at the girl, Something told him that helping her might lead him down a path he wasn't ready for. The path ahead would be anything but simple, and it would test him in ways he could never imagine. The little girl's words hung in the air, each syllable heavier than the last. She's sick, really sick, the kind of sick where no one can help. But you can. You're strong. You can make her better. The moment she spoke, Crusher felt something stir within him. It wasn't fear or anger, but something raw, something long buried deep beneath the hard layers of his hell's angel exterior. He wasn't sure what it was, but it made his stomach twist in ways he wasn't ready to confront. He stared at the $15 crumpled on the table, the paper now looking even more insignificant than before. He ran a hand through his short, graying hair, trying to make sense of what this kid was asking him. Why me? He thought. I'm no doctor, and I sure as hell don't do favors for anyone, especially not little girls who wander into diners with money they probably shouldn't have. But something about her, the quiet desperation in her voice, the intensity in her gaze, was unlike anything Crusher had encountered before. This wasn't a petty ask. This wasn't about a favor. This was real, and whether he liked it or not, he was now part of her story, whether he wanted to be or not. How do you expect me to help? Crusher's voice was rough, like it had been dragged through gravel. I'm not some kind of miracle worker, kid. The girl's eyes never wavered. There was no uncertainty in her. She knew exactly what she was asking for. I need you to bring her to the doctor, she said, her voice so matter-of-fact. It felt like an order more than a request. I've been trying, but they won't help. They say there's no point. They say she's too far gone. But you're strong. You can make them listen. Crusher's mind raced. A doctor? She wanted him to take her mother to a doctor? He wasn't even sure he knew what kind of doctor would be able to help a person who was too far gone. He wasn't a healer. He wasn't a miracle worker. He was a fighter, a man whose life revolved around motorcycles, leather jackets, and a constant state of battle, both physically and mentally. So, what was he supposed to do with this? Help a sick woman who was so ill that even the doctors had given up on her? The girl didn't seem to notice Crusher's internal conflict. She simply stood there, her small hands clutching the edge of the table as she stared at him. I've heard people say that you're different from the others, she continued, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. You're not like the other men I've seen. You care. You're the only one who can help us. The words hit Crusher like a sledgehammer to the chest. Care? He cared? The last time anyone had said anything even remotely like that to him, it had been years ago, and it hadn't stuck. He was tough, cold. He didn't care about anyone. Not really. Not since the club had turned him into the man he was now. But the girl, there was something in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of him. She didn't see him as the biker everyone else feared. She saw him as a person, someone who could do something. The weight of her gaze was enough to break down walls that Crusher didn't even know were still standing. Look, kid, he stood up slowly, pushing his chair back with a creak. He didn't know how to say what he needed to say. I don't know anything about doctors or saving lives. I'm not your guy for this. But the girl's expression didn't falter. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something that made Crusher's heart skip a beat, a photo. She slid it across the table to him, her fingers trembling slightly as she did so. The photo was old, faded at the edges, but the image was clear enough. It was a picture of a woman, her mother, no doubt. She was sitting on a porch swing, a soft smile on her face, her arms wrapped around a young child who looked exactly like the girl sitting across from him now. The woman was beautiful, with soft features and warm, kind eyes. There was something about her that reminded Crusher of a different time in his life, before everything had turned dark and hard. I don't know who else to ask, the girl whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Please, I can't lose her. I just can't. Crusher felt a tightening in his chest. God, this was bad. Really bad. His eyes drifted back to the photo, then to the girl. She was looking at him with such hope in her eyes that seemed to see something in him that he didn't even see in himself. It was like she was waiting for him to make the decision for her, to decide whether or not he was willing to do something, anything to help. And just for a moment, he was torn. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't some random coincidence. This wasn't some kid begging for help out of desperation. No, this was something deeper. It was a cry for help. A cry that he couldn't ignore. "All right," he finally said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "I'll take you to the doctor. But don't get your hopes up. I don't know if this will help, but I'll try." The girl's face lit up with relief, her whole body relaxing in a way that only a child could. She didn't say anything at first, just sat there, the corners of her lips lifting in the faintest smile. It was as if she knew something Crusher didn't. As Crusher stood there, still trying to process everything, his mind raced through the possibilities. Who was this woman? Why was she so ill? And what exactly was he getting himself into? The more he thought about it, the more questions piled up. But for some reason, he couldn't walk away from this. He looked down at the girl, his heart heavy with a strange mix of emotions. "We need to go now," he said, trying to ignore the unease that had settled in his gut. The girl nodded eagerly, her eyes bright with anticipation. "I'll show you where she is. We'll make it in time. I know we will." Crusher could barely hold back the swell of confusion that surged through him. Make it in time? What did that even mean? And yet, there was something in the girl's eyes, something that told him that against all odds, this might be worth the risk. He followed her out of the diner, his boots thumping on the pavement, the weight of the photo in his pocket, pulling him forward. This was no longer just a simple favor. This was something deeper, something that would change his life in ways he never could have anticipated. As they walked toward his bike, Crusher glanced down at the girl. She was still silent, her small frame moving with an urgency that he couldn't quite understand. But in that moment, as they made their way to the motorcycle, Crusher felt an overwhelming need to see this through. He wasn't sure why, but it didn't matter. He was in this now, and there was no turning back. The ride to the girl's house was quieter than Crusher had expected. The only sound was the rumble of his Harley as it cut through the still evening air, the engine's growl a stark contrast to the peaceful silence that enveloped them. The little girl, seated behind him on the bike, held onto him tightly, her arms wrapped around his waist with a determination that belied her small size. She didn't speak, didn't fidget, she just held on, her body stiff but resolute. Crusher couldn't help but feel a strange connection to her, as if he were carrying the weight of her entire world on his shoulders. As they rode, the familiar streets of the small town blurred around them. He took his usual route, down the main highway, through the outskirts, but tonight it felt different. Everything felt different. It wasn't just the girl, the desperation in her eyes, or the photo of her mother that had made him question his every move. It was the fact that he was actually doing this. He was on his way to do something he had never imagined himself doing, helping someone. And, more importantly, someone who wasn't asking for help for themselves, but for someone they loved, someone who needed him. Crusher had always believed in the code, never show weakness, never let anyone see you sweat. He had learned long ago that the only way to survive in this world was to keep your emotions locked away, hidden beneath layers of leather and ink. But now, with the girl clinging to his back, the world felt like it was pushing him to break that code, to open up and actually care about something beyond himself. When they finally reached the house, Crusher stopped the bike at the edge of a narrow dirt road. The place was far from what he'd expected. It wasn't some rundown shack or abandoned home like he'd thought. It was a small, modest house with a neat lawn and a few overgrown flower beds that gave it a lived-in feel. A faint smell of lilacs wafted in the air, and there was a single porch light glowing softly in the dimming light. It looked like a place where someone had once cared for it, a place that had seen better days. The girl slid off the bike without a word and started walking toward the front door, her steps quick but steady. Crusher followed, his boots crunching on the gravel as he watched her every move. He was still unsure of what he was walking into. What exactly did this woman need? Was this some kind of trap? He had seen enough in his life to know that people didn't just ask for help out of the goodness of their hearts. There had to be more to this story, but as he stepped onto the porch behind the girl, he was met with a sight that took his breath away. The door opened slowly, creaking on its hinges. A woman stood there, frail and pale, leaning on the doorframe for support. Her hair was unkempt, and her clothes were faded, as if she hadn't bothered to change in days. But it wasn't just her appearance that made Crusher stop dead in his tracks. It was the look in her eyes. There was no spark of life in them, just a dull emptiness, like she had already given up. Her gaze was distant, lost somewhere far beyond the house, beyond the world. It was the kind of look that made Crusher's chest tighten, as if he could feel her pain radiating off of her. The little girl, without missing a beat, stepped forward and placed a hand gently on her mother's arm. "Mom," she whispered, her voice soft and soothing, like she had said it 1,000,000 times before. "Mom, I brought him. I brought the biker." The woman's eyes flickered for a moment, just a flicker of recognition, before her gaze moved past them, almost as if she hadn't fully registered who was standing there. "You shouldn't have," she murmured, her voice weak, barely above a whisper. "I don't need anyone. You don't need to be here." Crusher felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't know what to say. What could he say? This wasn't a fight he could win with a punch or a threat. It wasn't about power or control. This was something deeper, something far more painful. And for the first time in his life, Crusher didn't know how to fix it. "I came to help," Crusher finally said, his voice hoarse, unsure. He didn't even know how to word it. It wasn't like he had any medical skills or a miracle cure to offer. But there was something about her, about the girl, that made him want to try. The woman's eyes flickered again, but this time they held something different, something almost like curiosity. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes taking in his worn leather jacket, his tattoos, and the hardness that radiated from him. He could see the silent judgment in her gaze, but there was also something else. It was like she was searching for a reason to believe that someone cared. "You shouldn't have brought him here," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. "You can't save me." The words stung, and Crusher could feel a heat rise in his chest. He didn't like being told what he could or couldn't do. Hell, he had spent most of his life defying expectations. But this wasn't a fight he could win by force. It wasn't about pushing someone down to make them see things his way. This was different. The little girl, still holding her mother's arm, turned to Crusher, her eyes filled with hope and a quiet plea. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "You're the only one who can help us." Crusher looked from the girl to the woman, trying to process what he was seeing. He wanted to walk away, to turn around and ride back to the safety of the club, back to the place where he knew the rules, where he could control the outcome. But something told him that walking away wasn't an option. He stepped forward slowly, his boots heavy against the wooden porch. He knelt down in front of the woman, looking her straight in the eyes. "I don't know how much time you have left," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not walking away. I'm not going anywhere." The woman's eyes softened, and for the first time since he had arrived, she seemed to really look at him. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, a spark of recognition. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was something close. "I'll do whatever it takes to get you the help you need," Crusher continued, his voice calm but resolute. "But you have to trust me. You have to trust that I'm here for you." The woman didn't respond immediately. Instead, she just stared at him as though weighing his words, searching for any sign that he wasn't just another stranger who had come and gone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping as if a weight had been lifted, even if only slightly. "I'm not asking for a miracle," she said, her voice still weak, but tinged with something that resembled hope. "I just want her to know that I tried. I just want her to have something to hold on to." Crusher felt the enormity of her words. She just wanted her daughter to have something to hold on to. It hit him harder than he expected. Here was a woman, on the brink of giving up, trying to make sure her child wasn't left with nothing. The weight of that responsibility, it was too much to bear. "Then let's start," Crusher said, standing up and offering his hand to the woman. "We'll get you the help you need. I promise." And as the woman slowly took his hand, He realized that this wasn't just about saving someone's life, it was about making sure that someone didn't die without knowing they mattered. As the evening sky deepened into a blanket of black, Crusher's heart pounded in his chest like the roar of his motorcycle's engine. They had just finished loading the woman into the back of his bike. He hadn't expected her to be this frail, this close to death. Her body seemed to crumble in his arms, a fragile thing that barely felt alive. And the little girl, still by his side, clung to him as if he were her last tether to the world. Crusher had been through countless dangerous situations in his life, shootouts, brawls, car chases, but this felt different. This wasn't a fight to win or a deal to make. This was real life, and no amount of force, no amount of toughness could change the reality that the woman needed help fast before it was too late. With every step toward the motorcycle, Crusher's stomach twisted. What the hell had he gotten himself into? How did a simple act of kindness become a full-on rescue mission? He wasn't sure, but he couldn't stop now. Not after everything. Where to? He asked the girl, his voice thick, with a mix of uncertainty and determination. He was used to being in control, used to commanding situations, but this one was out of his hands. He needed guidance, and fast. The little girl didn't hesitate. "The clinic," she said softly. "It's not far." Crusher nodded grimly and revved the engine. The woman was too weak to hold on, so he told the girl to climb on behind him and keep a tight hold of her mom. As they took off, the sound of the bike revving under them filled the night air, the wind whipping around them as they sped down the empty roads. The clinic wasn't far, but it felt like miles with every passing second. Crusher could feel the weight of the woman's frail body pressing against his back. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold and clammy. Her pulse weak and erratic. The girl, her arms wrapped tightly around her mother's frail form, seemed almost serene, like she knew something Crusher didn't, like she knew everything would be okay, even when every part of him screamed that it wouldn't be. When they finally reached the clinic, it was eerily quiet. The lights were dimmed, and the parking lot was mostly empty, save for a few vehicles parked in the far corner. Crusher pulled the bike up close to the front door, his mind racing as he jumped off and helped the girl ease her mother onto the ground. Every step seemed like it took forever. He looked at the girl, who was still holding onto her mother like a lifeline, her eyes wide with hope. "Get inside," Crusher told her, his voice low. "Tell them to help her." The girl didn't waste a second. She rushed into the clinic, disappearing into the sterile, whitewashed hallways. Crusher stood outside, pacing in circles, his hands trembling from the cold night air. The seconds felt like hours. Every few moments, he glanced at the door, praying for someone to come out, praying that they would have some good news. But there was nothing. The clinic was small, too small for a proper emergency room. And he knew the truth. They didn't have the equipment here to handle a case like this. The woman needed more than just basic care. She needed immediate attention, and he had no idea if they could provide that. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the girl came rushing back out, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "They can't help," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They don't have the right medicine. They don't have what she needs." Crusher's heart sank. He felt a sharp pang of frustration and helplessness. He had been so sure, he had thought he was doing the right thing. But now, here they were, standing in front of a building that couldn't offer them anything more than false hope. "Where else?" he demanded, his voice strained with urgency. "Tell me where else we can go." The girl's eyes filled with tears. I don't know where to go." Her voice cracked. "I thought you were going to save her. You promised." The words hit Crusher harder than he expected. He had promised, and now he was facing the reality that he might not be able to keep that promise. Just then, an older man in a white coat stepped out from the back of the clinic. His face was weary, his eyes tired. He had clearly been up for hours, probably dealing with patients who weren't any better off than the woman behind Crusher. But he didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward them, his eyes scanning the scene before landing on the woman. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice low but authoritative. "We need help." Crusher said quickly, his voice tinged with desperation. "She's really sick. We need a doctor." The man paused, then nodded grimly. "Bring her inside," he said. "We'll do what we can." The girl's face lit up with a flicker of hope, and Crusher's chest tightened. He wasn't sure what kind of help they could provide, but this was their only shot. He followed the doctor into the clinic, carrying the woman carefully, her frail body a constant reminder of how fragile life really was. Inside, the clinic was as cold and sterile as any other. Bright lights flickered overhead as nurses moved quickly between rooms, handling cases that were clearly overwhelming for a facility of this size. The doctor led them into an examination room, where he instructed Crusher to lay the woman down on the bed. As they worked quickly, the doctor ran tests, checking her vitals, scanning her body for signs of something more. Crusher stood by the door, his arms crossed, his mind racing. He couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation press on him. What if it was too late? What if this was it? And then, after what felt like forever, the doctor turned to him, his expression grim. "We can save her," the doctor said, his voice quiet but filled with certainty, "but it's going to take a lot more than what we have here." Crusher's heart raced. "What do you need?" he asked, his voice desperate. The doctor met his eyes. "We need to get her to a larger hospital, one with the right equipment, the right care." It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had left. This story isn't over yet. What happens next? Will the woman survive? Will Crusher be able to keep his promise? And what will the little girl learn from this journey? If you're as hooked as I am, don't leave now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you can follow this story all the way through. And hey, let me know in the comments, what would you do if you were in Crusher's shoes? Have you ever been faced with a moment that changed your life forever? I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts, your city, and your story below. Don't miss the next twist. The journey's just beginning.